What's up, y'all? You're watching Union Minded. I'm your host, Eric, and today we're going to talk about the Florida GOP and their attack on history. They've recently, their Department of Education has passed new standards in Florida that have revised how subjects from America's past and the ugly parts of its past, such as slavery, are going to be taught. And it's really disappointing. It's a whitewashing of history, but really it's also indicative of what is happening. All right. Florida is like what the new GOP is. Gone are the days of Reagan-esque politicians. We have very far right politicians currently dominating the conversation in the GOP. So this idea that they're going to go back to the old form of Republican politics, although those were still very racist politics, they were more dependent on the dog whistles and less overt, outright racism. This new GOP, though, they're not dependent that much on dog whistles, although they're country music artists. The one that has his little song trending, he definitely used a lot of dog whistles and some blatant imagery in his racism. But they're not as dependent on the dog whistles, and so now they're outright trying to erase what history is and what really happened here in these states, so that our children grow up unaware of how vicious and ugly it was, and probably to kind of indoctrinate them a little bit more into how wonderful and great it's always been for everybody in these United States. But that's not the case. It hasn't been. The wounds have not healed. There has not been a genuine effort to make amends for the crimes committed, for the theft and robbery of the value of the labor, for the murders. And it's not ancient history. We're talking people's fathers did this. Fathers who are still alive today did these things. So it's not that old. It's not that long ago where vicious ugliness was still being perpetuated. And today it's just morphed. It still is perpetuated. And I know that I do a union-minded channel, and I know there are conservatives who watch this channel for my rah-rah when I'm raging against corporations, and I applaud you for doing so. But I need you guys to look in the mirror a little bit. I know these videos tend to upset you guys. I totally get it. But you need to understand what the true history is and what really happened here. And it's not to say that it's your fault. But if you're not actively trying to correct these things, and you're just living the dream, oblivious to the struggles that's going on around you, then it becomes your fault, because you're perpetuating the same exact system that's been built to destroy our communities, which are your communities as well, because we are all members of the same union body. Now, with that as my intro, let's dive in. This is according to Politico. New Florida teaching standards say African Americans received some personal benefit from slavery. Really? Personal benefit, huh? From slavery. Is that why all those white folks was lining up to be slaves? And before you jump at me and say, there were white slaves too. No, there weren't. There were indentured servants. They were not slaves. The new standards, backed unanimously by the State Board of Education, encompass the controversial 2022 law regulating how race can be taught in schools. Florida education officials approved new standards for teaching African American history Wednesday in response to the anti-woke policies touted by Governor Ron DeSanctimonious, as critics urged the state to rethink the curriculum, claiming that it only presents half the story and half the truth. The new standards, backed unanimously by the State Board of Racist Education, encompass the controversial 2022 law regulating how race can be taught in Florida schools, something that was specifically sought by the Republican governor, Ron DeGoofy, and presidential contender. Board members and state officials defended the updated curriculum that they say touches on the darkest parts of U.S. history, against charges by opponents, including the state's largest teachers union, that the changes are an attempt to whitewash what students are learning. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly in American history, Education Commissioner and local racist Manny Diaz Jr. said at Wednesday's board meeting in Orlando. The changes to Florida's teaching standards come as the Goofy and other state leaders have put an intense focus on what students are learning about race in their classroom, or rather, what they are not learning about race in their classroom and about history. The state tweaked its history curriculum to match the so-called Stop Woke Act law that takes aim at lessons over issues like white privilege by creating new protections for students and workers, including that a person should not be instructed to feel guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress due to their race, color, sex, or national origin. Really? Name me the teacher that is telling a child to feel guilty about something. Because you learn something and it causes you to think and feel, that's not a bad thing. That is how you build empathy. That is how you build better human beings. Just saying. The law specifically requires schools to teach about how freedoms have been infringed by sexism, slavery, racial oppression, racial segregation, and racial discrimination, and be delivered in an age-appropriate manner. As such, these critics of the new standards argue that necessary topics have been aged up to older students and watered down. Several speakers at Wednesday's meeting pointed to specific pieces of the new standards they considered questionable, joining the Florida Education Association Union and the NAACP Florida State Conference, among other groups, in opposing the curriculum they claim will purposefully omit and rewrite key historical facts about the Black experience. The opposition included local Democratic state lawmaker Rep. Anna Escamani, Democrat out of Orlando, and Senator Geraldine Thompson, Democrat out of Orlando, who both spoke at the meeting. Some of the issues raised around the standards that include instruction on how slaves developed skills, which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit, and lessons that touch on acts of violence perpetuated against and by African Americans. Let me get this straight. If I defend myself from an aggressive attacker, I'm now perpetuating violence? I defended myself. Isn't that the American way of life? You defend your home, castle doctrine and all that. So here you have race riots that were perpetuated against slaves, and we're talking about African Americans defending themselves in these race riots. And if you're talking about slave rebellions, you're talking about Africans defending themselves, slaves defending themselves against their masters who were whipping, oppressing, and murdering them and raping their women. Yeah, no, that's perfectly acceptable. How slaves developed skills, really? Skills? They developed skills? No, they were beaten and tortured and forced to work for free in horrible conditions, and they happened to learn how to do it well, whatever skill it was. But that doesn't mean it benefited them. They weren't allowed to do it if they weren't a slave. They didn't get any benefits of learning anything. They had to work. That was it. So let's stop the nonsense. Further, opponents took aim at how the standards approach Black history lessons for younger students, which largely require them to recognize Black inventors, explorers, and artists. These standards in kindergarten through 4th grade simply ask our students to recognize and identify Elizabeth Albert, an elementary teacher and president of the Volusia United Educators Union, told the board Wednesday. As a teacher, we focus on the verb in the standards, and these are the lowest level of cognitive rigor. State board members and officials, however, pushed back on the arguments against the standards, contending that they do not teach that slavery was beneficial. Everything is there, said board member Kelly Garcia, another racist, a certified teacher from the Tampa area who was appointed by DeSantis. That's how you know she was appointed by the Goofy. And the Goofy only likes the racist folks. In March, the darkest parts of our history are addressed. Yeah, okay. Diaz, meanwhile, used the curriculum discussion to take a shot at the FEA union for blasting an opposition letter he said did not provide any substantive issue or articulate any single reason to actually reject the standards. Florida's Republican leaders have frequently clashed with teachers' unions over issues like reopening schools during the pandemic, which the unions opposed, and teachers' salary negotiations the state believed took too long. This is the same union that brought Frivolous lawsuits on the back of their members' hard-earned dues. Diaz, stop acting like you care about union members and union workers and the dues that they pay. This is all talking points to try to harm unions. Go choke yourself. Again, time and time again, we've defeated them in court. I wonder why. Could it be because you have a lot of conservative justices in Florida that are hearing your cases? Maybe. Or could you be outright lying? Probably. What are they fighting this time? You, like always. We always fight against racists and bad people, and we always fight for the people and try to raise standards of living. I don't know if you know that, but unions are a good thing for America. Florida is currently blocked from enforcing its anti-woke law in colleges and universities amid a federal lawsuit that is tied up in appeals court. Aside from that law, the state also engaged in a high-profile dispute with the nonprofit college board after state education department officials rejected its African American Studies AP program for initially including coursework on queer theory and other aspects it deemed objectionable. Listen, people, I get that it doesn't feel good to align yourselves with folks who are Nazis, folks who are sharing Nazi symbolism, who are attacking history as it should be taught, which is accurately, who are trying to whitewash everything that has happened in the past. It has to feel uncomfortable to be associated with those groups. Otherwise, you're kind of in it to win it. You know what I'm saying? So there's no shame in stepping away from something that no longer represents you. There's no shame in walking away from a bad ideal or a bad ideology, especially when you see it turning towards evil. You know it's wrong. You know it's wrong. This whole anti-being human and anti-freedom and anti-people having the freedom to live their life as they choose to live their lives. This whole, they call everybody a snowflake, and they're like, oh, we got to protect the feelings of small children who are learning about history, and they feel bad because of the people who founded this country so long ago and their greedy ways, where they just wanted all labor for free. They wanted it free in the North too. In fact, they joined sides, the South and the North. Businessmen kind of got together and was like, hey man, let's screw over all the workers to our benefit. And that's kind of where we're at. And that started in 1876. Compromise of 1877, look it up. Anyway, my name's Eric, you're watching Union Minded. Remember, the fight's not left and right, it's up and down. It's gonna take solidarity to win always. Each one teach one, get out there and reach one. And there could be no union without you and I front and center. And yes, race has something to do with union and the IBEW. Get over it. Peace.